Welcome to the Rational Egoist. You know who I am. You know who that is. That's the great Jim Valliant. We're just going to jump right in today. We got the Republican National Convention to discuss. We're going to give you the best analysis known to man here. Jim, you ready for this?
I am, and I have to confess, and it's not a pleasant confession. I watched every night, not all of it, but I watched every night of the fortnight from Monday to Thursday, the most important parts of the Republican convention. Call me a junkie, call me a guy who wastes his time, and I will never get those hours back of my life, I grant you. But I did watch a good deal.
I watched four speeches, and those are the four speeches we're going to focus on tonight. We're going to talk about Tucker Carlson, Eric Trump, JD Vance, and the Donald. But it just occurred to me as I see your book behind you, Creating Christ. I previously told you I couldn't find it, and now I know why I couldn't find it. It's because I didn't look in the box where it was. So I found it today, so I'm elated. I'm gonna start reading it now. I'm very excited about it. I've seen the documentary. Now I get to read the book. All is well with the world. So I want to start with Tucker. Um, a lot of people give this guy a lot of credit, and they say he's the only truth teller in, or one of the biggest truth tellers in the media. He's for the people. All I see is a snake oil salesman when I hear this guy talk. He was out there promoting democracy. This is what democracy is. We got to have democracy, yada, yada. And he talked about how much he loves Trump, which is contrary to what he said in his own emails about how he can't fucking stand him. So he's not an honest player, but yet people still go for it. So what were your thoughts on Tucker's speech?
The first, what you said there at the end was, of course, the first thing I noticed. He had been hanging out at the convention right next to JD Vance even before his speech. So I knew he was an active presence. He's a friend of JD Vance's. They're very much on the same page. One of the first thoughts I had was exactly your thought. Yeah, privately, this guy trashes Trump all the time, and in the most serious ways. And this was at the end of the Trump administration that he was exchanging these things. And afterwards, he was no fan of Trump before he left Fox, at least privately. Now, of course, he totally is. But to characterize his speech, it was pure religion. It was pure religion. It was a religious speech. It was not a political speech in any noticeable way, shape, or form. He began with religion, ended with religion, thematically was about religion. It was about how Donald Trump, he had the thing about leaders, being the brave guy and stuff, really overdoing Trump's,
Yeah,
it showed some grit. I'll grant you.
yeah.
Trump reassured the crowd, but he turns that into some kind of superhero courage, leader. But more than that, one of the consistent themes that we got was a purely religious one that focused on Trump himself. You know, I'm used to, especially since Reagan and the moral majority came into being a big influence, having religion be a big influence in the Republican Party. Before Reagan and the moral majority, and I think their opposition to the abortion decision is really what set this off, as well as the new Republican Southern strategy, taking the South from the Democrats in the wake of the end of segregation. They didn't appeal to racism, they appealed to religious values. And so Republican conventions for the last 40 years have gotten more and more and more religious. But at least back in the day, it was about an issue like abortion, where you could think, okay, your philosophical moral foundation is connected at least to a specific issue. In this convention, it wasn't the issues because they eschewed the topic of abortion pretty much because it's not a winner for the Republicans, but the religious focus was on Trump personally
Yeah.
himself, Trump the Messiah. See, isn't it obvious? Isn't it obvious that since the bullet missed Trump, that God has spared Trump
Yeah.
for a certain purpose,
Yeah.
and it's manifest destiny. Clearly, Trump, God wants Trump to win. Why would he have spared him? God's got great plans for Trump and America. If you don't vote for Trump, you're voting against God's plan. And so the really disturbing part was Trump Messiah. I have never heard religion used
No.
in that way.
No.
They were specifically saying that Trump is divinely ordained. Tucker was among the many, many speakers.
Sure.
Every single night there, they had at least one speaker, if not multiple speakers, making precisely the argument that I just said. Trump is specially anointed by God or Jesus, providence. They used all three words, but clearly, I was listening to one commentator after the event. Is it obviously this is a providential event? Jesus
Obviously, yeah.
stands for America via Trump, and so think of all those soft-headed Christian voters out there thinking, well, if I don't vote for Trump, I'm voting against God's plan.
You
But
know,
it,
Jim, the thing that strikes me about the new uh, God of the Republican Party is the concept now is completely divorced from virtue. It
right,
used to be that they really wanted to, disagree with them or not, and I certainly do. But it's like you said, it was abortion, gay marriage. It was a very religion oriented party where, if a man can't keep his vows to his wife, then we can't trust him. But now they have the God without any semblance of a tie to the morality of the Bible. It's a very odd thing. And there was something that struck me about Tucker, and we're going to get to it when we cover Trump's speech, where he said Trump has changed now. I talked to him. He's not, there's no self-aggrandizement. He's not being, this guy is so selfless. And I listened to Tucker after I had heard Trump's speech because I didn't listen live. That's way past my bedtime to be up listening to that. Plus, getting aggravated before bed and then I can't sleep. So
you know what
there you
I'm
go.
saying?
But
Just,
but that was something else that struck me. But so speaking of God, while you were watching, and I wasn't watching, but you sent me a message of Eric Trump where he said we are going to teach our children to love God.
our
And
children even God. He went down a list. Our economy will be better. The immigration will be better.
yeah,
Our children will believe in God. Now, how
yeah,
does an American government ever do that? That is unconstitutional in the face. The First Amendment to the United States Bill of Rights says no established religion. There shall be no establishment of religion in the United States, and that in the court through the 14th Amendment has been applied even against all 50 states. You cannot legitimately support a sectarian religion, encourage it, educate kids in it, or do something that would make kids believe in God in a
right,
constitution, not the government. If you're out there as a private advocate, if you're out there preaching whatever religion you're preaching, that's one thing as a private individual. But there can be no government policy that can be aimed at making our children, quote, believe in God. And what a strange promise Eric Trump made. And he too argued, of course, that dad's survival was an act
of
of God.
course,
No one can deny it. It's obvious, isn't it? And if you attempt to deny that it was an act of God, you're the one who's being illogical. How do you explain this coincidence? Now, no matter what the causal explanation is, the security, there's obviously a security lapse. How many rallies does Trump do? Trump is obviously a target. Presidents and politicians
right,
get shot at. Just within recent years, the congressional baseball game was shot up. In my lifetime, I've lived through, mind you, when I was a baby and 2 months old, Kennedy got shot. When I was a small child, Attorney General Robert Kennedy got shot. Martin Luther King Jr. got
right,
shot. They tried to shoot Gerald Ford, one of the Manson members. Reagan got shot. This
yeah,
is what happens. It's not like it's a rare, it's rare comparatively if you consider the number of appearances. But given all these public appearances and given the security lapse, we have a perfectly natural, even if this kid was just a nut, and he appears to me, is like I've been saying from the beginning, he's probably just a lone nut.
yeah,
But the point is that no matter what explanation you can give a complete psychological rendition of this kid. You could explain the history of the odds of political assassination attempts and assassinations. You could explain the security lapse that day, and it may have just been negligence on the part of Secret
yeah.
Service. But no natural explanation is going to convince people who
No,
think that God or Jesus has divinely appointed Trump to rule America, which is what they were saying, including Eric Trump, including Tucker Carlson.
right. It's such a first of all the hubris involved. Like even if you postulate a creator of the universe, Like, wouldn't this being have more important things to do than worry about what Trump is doing? And furthermore, why not just not let the guy get the shot off? Why not? Another person lost his life.
That's
Why? Yeah. So why not prevent that? But
it.
there's a very close resemblance in Jim, the religious mind and the conspiratorial mind, where there's safety hatch after safety hatch that does not allow them to satisfy Karl Popper's requirements of science, right?
No one's requirements of
Yeah,
science.
no, but they can't be falsified. It does not matter what evidence
There
you
can't be evidence.
present.
Exactly. We could go do much better than Popper even. We could say, look, no evidence is ever going to convince you, right? I could give you the solid 100% causal explanation for the event, but they will still believe it was a divine event.
Yeah.
And
And
they're
Tucker said Trump was shot in the face. And I got to tell you, I talked to a friend of mine who'd been shot 6 times, and he told me there's a big difference between shot and being grazed. And it's not to minimize. Look, he was within a quarter inch of losing his life, and he showed tremendous grit, like you said, to stand up. I'm not minimizing that at all. But while I'm not going to minimize that, I'm also not going to exaggerate. He was not shot in the face. You
no,
know,
I've dealt with cases as a prosecutor where people were shot in the face, and it either results in death or horrific injury. For
sure.
which, I mean, if you're shot straight in the face, I mean, a bullet coming into your head, your skull,
Yeah.
it's never an easy light matter. Trump didn't skip a beat. It grazed his ear, and if God, but you see, that's the way we have to look at it. We're looking at it from the divine perspective. Apparently, it was God's plan to come close and miss. You say, why didn't God prevent the shooting altogether if he's God's? No, no, no. God wanted him to be an almost martyr to help the Republican cause. God wanted to show his divine will and his, the giant finger coming down from on high. I have chosen uh, Donald Trump to be my emissary on earth. So the near miss was part of God's communication to us, don't you see? Because it's obviously a matter of providence and divine plan. And so, by injuring his ear, God is and making it close. God is actually pointing his finger at him. Yes, he could have died, but I chose to have him survive because I've got bigger plans. Now you say to yourself, yeah, well then why didn't God protect that poor innocent father who did get killed, mind you, and that guy was kind of heroic. I mean, my God, but you see, God wanted him dead would have to be the conclusion, right?
Yeah.
That would be God wanted a martyr for the Republican cause to help their case.
Because
That's
that's what's important, not that guy's life and his family.
the logic we actually hear.
I've heard there was an inscription on one of the walls at Auschwitz, and I don't know if it's an apocryphal story or if it's true, but it fits nonetheless. And what it said, and paraphrasing, is if God exists, he's going to have to ask me for forgiveness.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's very, very apt in cases like this.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, maybe you do, if Eric Trump referenced it, but Tucker certainly did over and over, the idea that the election was stolen. So they're very much this supposed pivot to unification and kumbaya or whatever they're talking about. Tucker and alluded to the stolen election. Did Eric do that? I don't recall, but I think he did, but I'm
He,
not positive.
it was, he did a rhetorical maneuver very much like Dr. Ben Carson when he spoke, did this rhetorical maneuver. First, they tried to ruin Trump's
Yeah.
reputation.
Yes, they.
They tried to bankrupt him. Then they tried to convict him of crimes. Then they tried to kill him. It's all the
Yeah.
same day for
It's the
them.
same group. They're all involved. Yeah.
Simplified field theory of
Yeah.
enemies of
Yeah.
Trump.
And none of them talks ever.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, the what he's doing is he's putting together an argument like that.
Yeah.
You see, this is all we can see that God is pushing back on the nasty personal attacks on Donald Trump, and it's all part, don't you see, of a coherent divine plan.
I
He's,
find that aspect very scary.
I do too. It is getting more emotionalist. It is getting more tribalist. You
Yeah.
know, Republicans complain about how the Democrats are all about identity politics. And famously, before Biden chose Kamala Harris to be his running mate, he set out sort of demographic qualifications. It will have to be a black woman. Well, okay, that's identity politics. And now you're making your selection based on a person's inclusion in some intersectional victim group. Well, the Republicans do the same thing. They absolutely do.
Of course they do.
And
You know,
it'll be obvious. It's the hillbilly thing. It's the working
yeah,
class thing.
yeah. A
That
friend of mine, Jim, once commented to me, and when Trump first ascended, he said, "What we're seeing right now is white entitlement." You,
in a way, it's saying
it,
we're see, notice the victimology logic. The left says we're the victims of systemic racism and
right.
patriarchy. That the right is saying we're the victims of the left's persecution.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
the victims of this reverse racism. We're being white working class male, like J.D. Vance's background.
And flyover country. We're in flyover country, and
That's it.
yeah,
That's
and I don't care for that any more than I care for the idea that minorities are all victims. I don't buy it.
is not the way to go about this.
No.
And the truth is that in reality, everyone is affected by bad government policy.
Yeah.
You know, if you're okay, are poor people more impacted by inflation? Of course, but it's not a racial thing. Inflation doesn't discriminate on the basis of race or gender or sexual orientation, does it? Inflation is inflation. If you have an answer to help the affordability for most Americans to buy groceries or gasoline or rent, then what you do is you attack the inflation. You attack the government's economic policies, which are affecting all races, all sexual orientations. It's not a tribal argument; it's an abstract argument about policy. And another sad thing is that previously, a respect for the U.S. Constitution, philosophically, or a respect for the free market in economics and history, that's all gone.
Oh,
The
it's torched.
Teamster
Yeah.
boss spoke, and speaker after speaker after speaker, again, J.D. Vance will chime in on this, speaker after speaker said, no, we're not wedded anymore to that old liberal economic laissez-faire policy of the past. And of course, they have to. And out of everyone's mouth is how tariffs will improve affordability.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking that.
Don't
You
you
know,
know this will cut prices for the working people?
yeah.
What?
Yeah, I called into a local talk show yesterday. He had been the host was complaining about the inflation and talking about how Trump's going to fix it. And told him, how exactly are Trump's low interest rates, high tariff policies going to bring down prices? It's just, I mean, you have to be economically illiterate to believe that.
Well, Trump lies about tariffs anyway. It's as if China is paying the tariff. No.
No, American companies do. The importer pays the tariff.
And so he's got it all wrong who pays in the first place. So it's a giant misdirection. But he's going to say 100% tariff or 50% tariff on everything, and then an additional tariff on China. Well, ladies and gentlemen, where do you think Walmart, where do you think Amazon gets their cheapest stuff? And look, if there's reasons to go after China, militarily. I mean, we should not recognize, the government should not recognize a dictatorship like China, in my view. That would discourage trade. But if you have reasons to go after China, don't make them economic, because you're not going to help consumers by increasing the price of cheaper foreign goods. Just the opposite. You get rid of tariffs if you want to reduce prices. If you want to help people who can't afford things, what you do is you eliminate the tariff, which only adds to the price. What we're saying is that when an American product is not as cheap or efficient, we're going to raise the tariff so much on the foreign good. So what does that do? It's not taking down prices for the poor. It's making them more expensive. It's making the stuff less affordable.
Yeah. You know, you referenced this, and to me, it was the most salient part of J.D. Vance's speech, where he said that America is not just an idea. He said, yes, it's an idea, but we have basically real life stuff. And I made a post about this. What he did was he was illustrating the theory practice dichotomy, when in reality, yes, America is an idea with concrete applications, but you need both. You can't just go to these concrete applications completely divorced from principle, But he ends up doing the same thing as Trump: tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. The democracy, all that. I don't remember if he used that specific word, but it's ultimately an appeal to the masses. What he sees, which to me is insulting, but whatever. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, he was quite explicit in his assault on ideas, his assault on ideology. Their anti-intellectualism is now one of the major ideological planks of their anti-ideology. He said, this is what he said. It has been said that America is a nation of ideas, but America, I'll leave out the ellipses here, dot, 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 but America is more than just a good idea. America is, quote, a group of people. He then went on to explain that people don't fight and die for an abstraction. They fight and die for their families and homes. Uh-huh. Well, that is, to him, the ideas of America are a bunch of floating abstractions. Look, if my family, say, turned Nazi, I hope I would be disloyal to, quote, my family. My loyalty is not to a specific group of people. Insofar as Americans no longer respect the idea of individual rights, I have no desire to fight for them. Only insofar as Americans and America as such stands for a set of ideas is it worth fighting and dying for. If I was living in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, I would not want to fight for a specific group of people. That's what Hitler was saying. Fight for the fatherland, fight for the Aryan race.
Blood
He's
and soil.
Yeah, exactly. And so those kind of collectivist, or it really doesn't matter much whether it's communism either, because they're fighting for the proletariat, the worldwide working class. So no, it's not a group of people that I'm in favor of unless you start involving those other, quote, abstractions, Senator Vance. It is only those abstractions that make my family, make my nation worth fighting and possibly dying for. So my response when there was an argument on social media about this, I had to quote J.D. Vance, and if I must die, please make it be for an abstraction. If I die for my wife and I die for love, it'll be because of the values that I find in that amazing, brilliant, loving woman. Okay, I will die for love. I will die for her virtue. I will not die for the concept of marriage. I mean, I will not die because, everyone's got to go down. If she, like I say, if my wife turned into a Nazi, that would be a problem in our relationship.
A problem.
The thing that makes the difference.
I wasn't going to ask about this, but it just occurred to me. What do you think about the P.T. Barnum aspect of this thing? I mean, the Amber Rose talked, and then you had Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock came out and performed.
Well, if you had any doubt from J.D. Vance's assault on ideas, people don't die for abstractions. They die for a group of people like family or something. There's giving sort of the philosophical or abstract window dressing for this assault on intellectualism and ideology as such. But the rest of it was certainly chiming in. The last night was astonishing. We had Billy Graham's son. We had an African-American preacher from Detroit, from the church where Trump recently spoke. So you had religious folks. And then to counter, the religious folks, what did we have? We had Chris Rock lip syncing.
Not Chris Rock.
God, Kid Rock, excuse me. Not Chris. Oh, that was awful. I did a Biden, didn't I? But in any event, the Kid Rock, obviously lip syncing Kid Rock, adapts one of his famous songs just for Trump, fight, fight, fight. And then Hulk Hogan, and then Dana White. It was like I was watching wrestling night. And so, when you want a serious argument, when you want a serious endorsement, what you do is you get Hulk Hogan out there to rip his shirt off and say how Trumplemania should rule America. It was sheer emotionalist, sheer P.T. Barnum appeal. That put the capper on the anti-intellectualism. If you had any doubt about what was coming out of Vance's mouth or these clergymen's mouths, surely that last night showed you just what a circus it was. It was a show. Trump is a television entertainer. He, from The Apprentice. And he took all of that, and he took his celebrity friends from wrestling, and he brought them right there, put him front and center to fully put the capper on this anti-intellectual new Republican Party. Ayn Rand was complaining back in the 1960s and 50s about the anti-intellectualism of the right. the Cracker Barrel folksy wisdom that they turn to, which is no answer to intellectual Marxism. So you're saying, look, if they're intellectually bankrupt on both sides, if the Republican Party was intellectually bankrupt when Barry Goldwater, was making his famous pitch for freedom and justice, compared to now, 60 years on, 60 years on, the Republican Party is not. Barry Goldwater was. These guys were professors. These guys were intellectuals compared to what's going on today. These people are just the crudest, emotionalist, tribalist people making the most angry case they can. One that is loaded with their own sense of identity politics. Because guess what? There's those angry young men out there who are watching wrestling. You working class guys out there, that we're going to make an emotional pitch for you. We're one of you. A totally tribalist, totally identity politics kind of approach. Emotion over ideas. Yeah.
It's, you mentioned the Barry Goldwater, but I'm just thinking about William F. Buckley Jr. or George Will. Guys who, whether you agree with them or not, and I certainly have plenty of issues with both of them, were intellects. They made an intellectual case for what they wanted, and they didn't spend their time making shit up and just yelling and screaming about it. And that's what's happened today.
He made economic arguments. They tried at least to cite some actual science of economics. The Republican Party I knew, they were always weaker on the social agenda, right? As Ayn Rand said, each side is in favor of regulating the mind-body split part that they regulate. And so they were always weak when it came to the freedom of the mind, but they were at least could cite you. I mean, Buckley himself cited Austrian economists, monetarists. He would at least cite some more scientific, thoughtful economics. In doing it, that's gone. These people do not, for them, in fact, the speeches were saying the economists are wrong. Ignore the Wall Street Journal, ignore the Chamber of Commerce. They specifically named the Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce. They specifically said, ignore those people. And so if you were to say to them, hey, Moody's is saying that if Trump spends like he does, this is not going to help inflation. Well, who the hell are Moody's? Ignore even the data that Moody's provides. So these people have chucked in the towel on the science of economics in a way it's very sad to see for Republicans who were at least once upon a time a little better in that regard.
They also disparaged Wall Street in a way that would make the 99% very happy.
Absolutely.
It's just I mean, it's funny because for all their accusations of Marxism on the left, they do a pretty good job of using Marxist language.
Oh yeah. The work J.D. Vance himself said, we don't want a party who is in bed with Wall Street and corporate interests. We want a party focused on the working man. Now, I heard that at many a Democrat convention. I heard labor leaders make the same pitch I heard the Teamsters president make. I'd never heard that made at a Republican convention before, about how corporations simply screw the little guy. And that's all ever corporate. It wasn't corporate welfare or corporate favors. And of course, he favors corporate favors. J.D. Vance does. They want government involvement in corporations. Very much so.
So coming up to this convention, we had the disastrous debate for Biden. I actually heard a Democrat say that Trump had the second worst debate in the history of presidential debates. The problem is Biden had the worst, which I thought was a pretty good description. But then, of course, the assassination attempt
out of Trump's mouth. I mean, where does Trump? One of the first things out of Trump's mouth was all the legal authorities believe that Roe versus Wade should go. I went to law school. Most legal academics are in favor of Roe. I don't know where he gets the nonsense.
Well, he doesn't. He makes it up.
Makes it up.
Yeah, whatever you think. I personally think Roe was decided wrong. But
even Roe was decided wrong,
it doesn't mean everybody agrees with me.
Right. Trump said.
Yeah.
Trump literally said, whether you like it or not. I mean, the reasoning behind Roe can certainly be questioned, but when he's saying that most legal academics are authority,
everybody wanted it overturned. Everybody.
That's just absolute crazy. Yeah. So at least he could say the cray things he was saying. They were understandable. He could articulate them. Poor Joe couldn't sustain a single train of thought.
Poor Joe.
We finally beat Medicare,
Yeah, we
which
beat it. Yeah.
shows that Trump at least was aware when he comes back with a, yeah, you beat it to death. See, Trump was reactive. Trump was responding and listening to what was actually going on. Biden couldn't do that in any
No,
way, shape, or form. He
no.
could about the weird. I mean, what does that even mean? We beat
Yeah.
Medicare.
I don't know. He doesn't know either. But then of course, we had the assassination attempt, and there was a lot of talk going in that, maybe Trump could change, he's gonna have a different message, that sort of thing. And I even said in conversation, look, this guy almost died. There's no telling how he's gonna respond to that. You just don't know. I mean, that could affect people in very, very different ways. And for the first 25 minutes or so, the religious stuff I could do without, but nonetheless, it was a very conciliatory, humble speech on his part. But then he just went right back to Trump. I'm the greatest. And everything is the best. It's like nothing anyone's ever seen. It was the best economy. No one's ever seen anything like it. It was the best on immigration. No one's ever seen anything like it. Now it's so bad. No one's ever seen anything like it. And I'm listening to this and I'm just like, this guy is such a damn simpleton in the way he talks. And then it occurred to me while I'm watching, and it probably occurred to me before. I wonder how much of that is what appeals to people, because if you're a simpleton and you hear this guy talking your language, and it's like, and I'm not saying, so, please, I'm not saying everybody that supports Trump is a simpleton. I'm just saying that a simpleton would be drawn to such a message. And then there's this idea that he cares. He cares so much. And I remember in my early, 20s studying religion and wanting to get into, Christianity. And I remember the appeal of having this loving God that just cared about me. It's an attractive sort of thing, especially for somebody that's with poor self-esteem, doesn't have a lot going on. And now you have this idea that this billionaire president loves me. Wow, he really cares about my interest. And I think that's part of the draw. And I'll just say one thing more before I get your take on it, and something that I'm afraid of. And that's, look, I know a lot of bad people that have been shot. Getting shot does not make one a saint. Whether, I mean,
There where bullets are flying very
yeah,
often indicates that you were
yeah.
involved in
So,
violence.
I mean, Trump is still the same scumbag liar he was beforehand.
Yeah,
So I don't want to see him harmed. I'm very glad that he lived. I'm happy they got the guy that did it, but he's not a saint
no.
at all. So what are your thoughts, Jim? And you watch the whole convention, everything leading up to this. So how do you do in your mind?
Oh my gosh. Well, just to comment on Trump not being a saint, this guy's kids took advantage of his career, even his political career. This guy is not been faithful to his wives. Forget whatever the truth about Stormy Daniels in particular is, but there have been more than one case like that. More than that, he uses bankruptcy, tactically, strategically, like a business, like a real, and New York real estate developers are all, because they have to be in bed with the government just to get the favors, and with the unions and the construction workers and Trump. Everyone knows Trump is not a saint. Trump has never been a saint. Trump has never actually even been an ideologue. Trump is a guy who throws out issues in a simple way that will appeal to people in a straightforward way if they're that simple minded. And that's what he does. He is not that simple minded. No. Trump is much smarter than the message that he's selling. Trump is smart. I am convinced of that. And therefore, the message he's selling is an act. And the way you described it like that, first he starts out humble. I'm only here to serve. And going back to Eric Trump, the other speaker that you had, he very much was all about that. Look, my dad was already rich and famous. He's made all these sacrifices. And even when they go after him with these cases, he's still doing it. He could have just thrown in the towel. If he didn't love you guys, if he wasn't sacrificed. Now, look at, he almost got shot and died. You see how he's willing to sacrifice, see how altruism is the standard. He's willing to sacrifice his life, his fortune, his sacred honor, so that you guys can, so he can be a vehicle for you and your needs. we were just talking about tariffs. It's a shell game when he says that his tariff is going to help affordability for the working class, just the reverse. So his pitch has to be very simple and emotionalist. It can't be too complicated because you'd be getting into economics and history and philosophy. You brought up all these other issues that I'm talking about. No, no, no. We got to keep it at this level, and he knows how to pitch it to that level. So yeah, he did I would say that he, as a public speaker, I would say that he rhetorically hit the assassination perfectly. And the way they arranged it, you could see, was obviously arranged. I'm not supposed to be here, Trump says. The crowd spontaneously responds, yes, you are. The divine plan thing. You're supposed to be here, as if Trump was not supposed to be there because only God could have said, is that supposed to be there line? That was not a question of supposed to, like the universe is all supposed to be. No, there's a teleological divine view of all action. And so the crowd would respond just in this perfectly timed, I'm not supposed to be here. And there, but for the grace of God, right? I'm gone. But the crowd responds spontaneously. We're supposed to believe, yes, you are. Yes, you are. See, and you don't want to overdo the guy who died either. So what do? They brought up his helmet and uniform, and Trump goes over and kisses the effigy that's wearing the poor victims, the poor dead man. So you're utilizing the Trump martyr to the cause. That's horrible. I hate the way the left is counterattacking. That's ugly as all hell. But the point is, Trump was using it. He was using it like an effective rhetorician, an effective entertainer. But then you're right. The minute he sort of emotionally found the correct pitch for his telling the story, and it is kind of interesting to hear Trump's side of the story. I mean, how it went down and so forth and so on. And I think it was good that he stood up and reassured the crowd that he wasn't dead, because I could see at the time a lot of people in the crowd assumed he was dead or badly injured. So I'm not going to take anything away from him there, but it doesn't turn him into a superhero in my mind. He survived a grazing wound from a rifle. The other guy did not. So you don't want to overuse that guy. But on the other hand, they did. They used him as a prop, and they're turning him into a martyr, like a Christian martyr for the cause, just as Trump is turned into a messiah for this cause. But of course, that didn't last. After he emotionally pitches the story of the assassination attempt in just the way he wants, he then comes back to being Trump. He then does. Now, promised he wasn't going to use the name Biden, but he
He
did.
couldn't help himself.
10 times worse than the worst president in America. Again,
Mhm.
Classic Trump hyperbolic.
Yeah.
The 10 times worse than the worst president we've ever had, like that. And of course, he's still name calling Nancy Pelosi and so forth. It became sort of a Trump stump speech, but before it was all over.
Yeah, it was couldn't stay away from the stolen election, the
Oh,
idea of this American carnage about. And
well,
then what is this with they're emptying their mental institutions and their prisons and sending everybody here. I mean, and people believe that? I mean, how? How do they believe that? It blows my mind how many lies this guy can tell. Whether he says it was the greatest economy ever, no. Biggest tax cut, no. The
immigration, you can just get a list of stuff. In fact,
yeah,
issue he's a little better on that he can't manage to sneak in a bunch of falsehood about. So yeah, his message across the board is
yeah,
anti-intellectual,
yeah,
anti-ideological,
yeah.
non.
The wall was almost done. Like, and then he talks about the national debt as if he didn't drive it up by $7 trillion. It's mind-boggling to me.
Trump was outspending Obama before COVID.
Yes.
Let me just put that in italics for all my Republican friends out there who unquestioningly support Trump. Trump was more of an economic spendthrift, contributed more to the national debt than Obama did in his first term before COVID. And then he spends more than $1 trillion to make the COVID lockdowns possible. And notice that there was not a breath of a word about the lockdowns, how he was the guy behind Fauci. He was the guy who, after, just 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we closed down the whole country. And it was his federal economic policy that made it possible for the states to do the lockdown. and it contributed enormously. And it was the excuse for Biden to spend, more trillions more on it. So his role in creating inflation, his role in the national debt, which in my mind, government spending and debt is the number one issue. When domestic issue in America today is this absurd and obscene national debt. We are spending ourselves into disaster. And what was Trump doing as president? He was outspending Obama. He was jawboning the Fed for zero interest rates. Um, he was setting up the inflation. In a way, Trump got lucky in the sense that he lost to Biden because his petroleum policy may have been different and may have mitigated it to some extent, but he would have had an inflation problem himself.
Of course he would have. Of course. You referenced something that Eric said, and I've heard this argument by a lot of people where they say, look, this guy didn't need to do this. He had everything he wanted, all the money and everything. So, when he does this, you just know he's doing it for the people and for the country. And I'm just like thinking, do these people really believe that the only motives that humans have are financial? That the desire for accomplishment, for importance, for power. That there's so many different things that could drive that other than his, altruistic desire to serve his fellow Americans.
Listen to Trump, how he talks about past presidents. Listen to Trump, how he talks about current dictators. No, he believes in the glorious trappings of political power. He believes that these are special people. He's almost like a Hegelian great man theorist. But to him, history is driven by great men, and he's one of them. Don't you know? And this whole manifest destiny argument is simply one of those kind of arguments. Destiny, Hegel's dialectic process maybe not be involved, but divine destiny is surely involved and makes Trump a great man. And Trump is aware of his own greatness in a way that's really
Well,
only consider the Republican primary. My Republican friends, Nikki Haley was polling better against Biden than Trump was throughout the primary. You chose a weaker candidate because you wanted Trump. It had to be Trump. Trump, Trump, Trump. The cult of personality of Trump made the Republicans collectively choose a weaker candidate. I mean, killing Biden policies was the goal. You choose your strongest candidate to undo that, right? It's not just Biden, Biden, Biden. See, now that Trump's the nominee, my Republican friends tell me, well, if you don't vote for Trump, then you're voting for Biden. Well, wait a minute here. How does that logic now work when you insisted on a weaker candidate?
yes.
You see? No,
Yes.
Trump is divinely ordained. Only Trump's greatness can spare us from, moderate Republicans and those evil Democrats. We need Messiah Trump. And Trump is bought into, I think psychologically even, he's bought into the crowd. He believes that crap. He is smarter than the policy he's announcing. But I think he actually does also start to, it seems, he's certainly putting off the impression that he believes this Messiah press about himself.
It certainly does, and you referenced Hegel, and I'm just thinking, well, if Biden's the thesis and Trump's the antithesis, who's going to be the synthesis? Who are we going to get?
Well, you see, J.D. Vance was kind of he has, you see, gone through the dialectical process. He was this poor working class hillbilly guy from, his mom was on drugs. He was raised by his mama, his grandmother, who had how many loaded guns in her house and used the F word so many times. It is a dubious background. But you see, he's this working class hillbilly who then became a venture capitalist, right? But don't judge me on my venture capitalist success. No, I'm a working class guy. Ignore all my business background. No, that's not how I want you to think of me. I want you to think of me as this hillbilly embodying, you see, the zeitgeist, to use a kind of Hegelian term, and synthesizing. See, he even tells the story of how he went from left to right. He says he toyed with the ideas of Ayn Rand. He was once an atheist libertarian, he says himself, until he found the religion of populism. In 2019, he was converted to Roman Catholicism, he says. But in his description of it, he's clear he never grasped objectivism or even libertarianism, frankly, in the first place. But you see, he went through the dialectical process, as he explains. I was this working class lefty. when he wrote his book, he was praised by the left. I mean, Ron Howard turned it into a movie. Then he becomes converted to the right and converted to Roman Catholicism and Trumpism. He said terrible things about Trump. He was a
Yeah.
Nazi. And now, of course, he said, Trump convinced me. Trump was right. Trump worked. And so by the time he runs for Senate just 2 years ago, he's a completely converted Trumpist who gets Trump's endorsement. And when it comes to stuff, J.D. Vance is ghastly. He is no economic liberal. He supports Biden's Federal Trade Commission boss. He supports antitrust laws going after big tech. He supports tariffs, as I say. He is not a friend of capitalism, freedom, business, or the original idea behind the American economy at all. We need to ignore Wall Street. We need to become a working man's party, he says. And America is not a question of abstractions. It's not about ideas. It's about this group of people who already happens to be here. Or if you come legitimately with government special permission. See, so if you were just a law-abiding, peaceful guy who comes over into America, even if you came illegally, you see, you are evil incarnate. You're taking jobs away. You're reducing wages. You're
Which is
destroying.
all bullshit. That's all bullshit. The evidence doesn't
Familiar
support it.
with economics knows all that's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not destroying Social Security. It is not driving down wages. It is not taking jobs away. No, quite the contrary. That's why the Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce wants at least some legal immigration. It's good for the economy.
It is. All right. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about the other side. Do you, and by the time this airs, we may already know, but do you think Biden's going to get out? And if so, who do you think is going to replace him?
I think at this point, if you'd asked me more than a week ago, I might have told you I don't know. But I think I'm increasingly confident that Biden must go. Now, the Democrats have still got a hell of a problem on their hands, and they still have yet to, apparently, to convince Biden himself. But look, the Democrat leader of the Senate, the Democrat leader of the House, more than 10% of the elected Democrats in Congress, both houses, have called, that group has openly called for it. You've got Obama now jumping ship. You got Nancy Pelosi jumping ship. I think that kind of pressure is just, he's not going to be able to resist it. And when you add the New York Times and the Washington Post now turning on Biden, they require the media. They require that support. And he's going to lose his own congressional support, even if he should win, if he keeps going. So I believe, but there's only one easy solution, isn't there? Kamala Harris. She's the natural successor. She's the elected running mate. And a major demographic for the Democratic Party would get irritated if
oh my God, yes, you bypass the first black woman who's the vice president.
Yeah, they couldn't do that. They'd lose their most loyal demographic. Now, think of what they have as a problem, though. They went through a formality of a primary. At least the Republicans allowed Nikki Haley to fight and lose. The Democrats didn't even have a real primary. They just staged a coronation. That primary could have fleshed out, like the debate problem Biden had. Might have had a chance to have some other kind of option available that would be legitimate. But now, after Biden has gotten the votes of all 50 states, in effect, for him to be the Democratic nominee, they're going to have to worry about the process by which they switch out their candidate. And as I say, if it's not the natural successor, Kamala Harris, there's going to be all kinds of upset. It could mean an open convention, and those can get ugly. Now, we're talking about the Republican convention. That was just a party. That was a celebration for a full conclusion, where you could bring in Haley and the governor of Florida to show unity. And so, but it's not going to be this happy unity party for the Democrats. It could be an ugly, ugly open convention where they bring the knives out, and every governor and senator who thinks they ought to be president will be battling it out with her. And that means that in the meantime, they don't even have a candidate, much less an integrated message. In the meantime, all the talk in the media is going to be about this trouble that the Democrats are having, when this whole month should be them attacking Trump on abortion and democracy. And they're not getting their message out, you see. And that, I think, is going to dramatically hurt whoever it is. Besides, Kamala Harris is sort of joined at the hip with Biden, having been his vice president, having defended his doddering age issues. I mean, she lied about it, but also being identified with the border, which, whether you and I like it or not, is one of the driving issues for the white working class that are going to turn out for Trump.
Yeah. You know, not that I ever had a high opinion of Biden. After I saw the way he acted in his debate with Paul Ryan, I thought that this guy is just a jerk.
He is a jerk.
Yeah, but if he really believes Trump is the threat to democracy that he says, and he still won't get out of the race when everybody that it likes him, cares about him, or whatever, except maybe his wife and kid, is telling him get out for the good of the party and good of the country, and he refuses because of his own ego, which is the only thing I could see. Unless he's totally delusional and really believes he's good, he's just not a good man. He's just not.
Was a good man. Biden was never a good man. I remember in the 1990s, I was a DA throughout the 1990s and worked in criminal law. Joe Biden was one of the fierce advocates of federal mandatory minimum sentencing, even for nonviolent drug offenses. And I remember at the time saying, what the hell? You mean you're going to give these severe mandatory minimums, even for nonviolent offenses, even for just drug possession offenses? Yep. Joe Biden was one of the men who made it happen under the Clinton administration. And so he's not a good man in my mind. Not a good man. Look, he cheated in law school. He plagiarized a whole speech from Neil Kinnock. He's a liar. He's an incompetent. And like I say, his attitude about sentencing on drug cases just shows him to be really a kind of a cruel guy before his brain started falling apart. So he's not a good man. No. And people who were saying that, now get this, before the debate and before the assassination attempt, what were they saying? Donald Trump is just doing it because he's selfish. Biden really cares about people. So, Mr. Biden, for the sake of your party, will you step aside? No, he's stubbornly saying. I thought you were doing it for your country. So you won't be doing it for the American people or even for your political party? No, you won't step aside. You're selfish. Now, this idea of using selfish with politicians is a very, see, if I were to run for office, I would tell you I would be doing it quite selfishly. And I would articulate that my interest is not in conflict with my country's interest. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. I'm going to help us all, including me. I want the world to be better for literally all of us. Okay. No, they have to, for them, there's an inherent conflict of interest. Well, if you're a power-lusting politician and you do want to screw over some people, push some people around, which both sides want to do, if it is a question of power and your desire to push some group around, then of course, in that sense, it's short-term. It may be self-motivated, but it's a power-lusting collectivist motive. So when they talk about selfishness with politicians, it was just so ironic because that whole line of argument the Democrats were using against Trump just sort of got pulled away from him as Biden is clearly putting his own political interests ahead of his party's.
Absolutely.
Say Trump was doing the same. The Republicans were doing the same. Trump was not their strongest candidate, but he was the Messiah, and only Trump could do it, you see.
And now Biden says he's the only one that can do it.
Right. Don't you think you're finally anointed? It's like in the biblical scene where Samuel the prophet comes and anoints David the king of Israel. That's how these people look at it on both sides. Even the secular left, it's a matter of personalities. It's a great man theory of history, right? Totally. These people are mystics on both sides. Whether they call themselves atheists on the left or not is irrelevant to me, although most of them call themselves Christians even. But the point is that it doesn't matter. They're both psychoepistemologically, emotionally, these people are religious. They're dogmatic. They're focused on the cult of personality. They're tribalists. It's us versus them, our group versus their group. It's us working class hillbillies on Vance's side, or the intersectional victimology, women, gays, and blacks who are, of course, in this systemically corrupt, situation we've got, the victims. Who's the victim? Who's the victim group is all important. So there's really no fundamental difference. I've been saying it for 50 years now, but now it's really become like painfully obvious. There is no fundamental philosophical difference between left and right.
None.
Tribalist, anti-intellectual, emotionalists, appealing to groups and classes and ignoring the founding ideas. And in Vance's case, attacking the abstract ideas behind the founding of America, the thing that makes America so great, at least.
Yes. All right, Jim. So tell me, where can people find you?
I'm very active on social media all the time. I'm at Facebook almost every day answering questions at the objectivism sites at Facebook, like the John Galt line, the Ayn Rand page, the Leonard Peikoff Appreciation Study page. I'm also a regular podcaster, and I do special seminars for the Ayn Rand Center UK, where you can hear me multiple times a week. And if you're a member, you can actually participate in seminars with me about the history of philosophy and constitutional law and so forth. And I have a website based on my book, Creating Christ, www.creatingchrist.com. I think I satisfied my publicist there.
I think you did. I think you did. Thanks a lot, Jim, for sharing its time with us.
Always great to talk to you, my brother.
For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Till next time.